everyone, and welcome to another episode of Wellbeing at Work, a workplace options podcast. I'm Ryan Arruda, a global marketing and communications intern here at WPO.
And I'm Emma Goldstein, an internal communications intern.
And today we are pleased to be joined by one of our professors at the University of Rhode Island, Dr. Kimberly Page. A little bit about Dr. Page. She is a business and law professor at the University of Rhode Island, an attorney licensed in Rhode Island, Washington, and California. She is the president pro tempore of the North Kingstown Town Council, as well as the president of the North Kingstown Food Pantry, with decades of experience in law, education, and civic leadership. Dr. Page, good morning.
Good morning. It's good to be here.
Wonderful. So let's dive right in. So I want to begin our discussion a little bit more on the business side of entering the workforce. We've discussed a lot of the emotional backgrounds and generational differences already in our series. So knowing your background, Dr. Page, I found it fit that we would begin with business. So what would you say business means today to a generation like Gen Z?
So I think, people think of business in a wide variety of ways in terms of you think of businesses as someplace you go to buy stuff and that sort of thing, but you also think of business as a job. You think of business as to how it is related to government. And that is true about all those things. It is the sort of thing of then it's just figuring out which is more relevant to you at the time that you're doing it. Are you going to the grocery store? Are you looking for a job? Are you looking for your business to have to pay less taxes?
Absolutely. Now, you teach a course at the University of Rhode Island, one of titled The Power of Business. And in that course, the final project is to complete a business plan head to toe with forms for, if you're filing for an LLC or a corporation, filling out things to send to the state, and just making it a full business plan for a hypothetical business that the students would create. What changes are you seeing in how younger generations think about entrepreneurship or leadership when creating this business plan?
So when I took over this course, it was the sort of thing they had done a business plan, but they didn't do things quite as much of if they were actually going to do them. And so sometimes I would get students who were telling me they were going to start a new car business or something really huge, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, it takes years of planning to start those businesses, and so I wanted students to be thinking more of the practical side, that if they really wanted to walk out of college and start an actual business, what would you need to do? And so when I first started doing this, I still saw students kind of thinking along the large realm of doing okay, I'm going to start a restaurant. And I still have students who start that. So I started talking to students of, well, let's start thinking about something that you actually could start doing right now. And I think now I do get more students who have told me, oh, yeah, I already do this as a side business. I already sell things on eBay, or I sell things through Etsy, or, I had a student a year and a half ago who made spoon jewelry that he sold at different fairs. And he was like, could I do that for my business plan? And I was like, oh, yeah. I usually tell the students, I had one student who actually financed her way through college by making guinea pig mats. So one, I didn't really know that guinea pigs had a mat. I've never owned a guinea pig. And two, I didn't know it was such a lucrative business. And I went onto her Etsy site and saw these guinea pig mats. And she was like, oh yeah, I am partially funding my college education through selling the guinea pig mats. And I was like, that's great. So I think that now I see students starting to think more about just small businesses that they could start and not things that they're going to do forever. And I think in the beginning, I saw students who thought like they had to pick the job that they were going to do for like the next 30 years. And now I have people who are like, oh, I'll do this for a couple years and then I'll do something else. And so that's refreshing.
Mm-hmm. I feel like there's always like such a big, like evident difference between Gen Z and older generations when it comes to like planning out our futures and like what we're going to do with the rest of our lives, because we know we might be passionate about one thing for 5 years and then our interests kind of like switch and change, and like we know that like that's okay, and like we'll have support like changing whatever we want to, and like continuing to learn different things under different realms that like I don't know, I just feel like we give more grace for like flexibility and change. But like I don't know, kind of going off that, do you think that like how do you think like business priorities like profit ethics, flexibility, like across evolve, how do you think it's evolved across generations, and like where do you see a switch for that in Gen Z?
So I had a student come into my class last semester who did power washing. And when he said when he first got out of college, he wanted to do a podcast, and he delved a little bit into that. And then he started thinking, because he had all these big ideas for business, something that was flashy. And then he realized that maybe he should just do something that everybody needs. And that's why he started doing the power washing business. And it's become tremendously successful. And I think that um, too often people were like, they were going to do the big business. Yeah, they were going to do the large restaurant. And because I had another guy come in one time, and he talked about how he wanted to franchise restaurants all across the United States. And I thought, wow, that's awfully ambitious. That's awfully expensive. And so taking the Gen Z student took more of the small approach, and was like, and he even said, I don't expect to be doing this forever. But it was building that business small with something just ordinary that needed to be taken care of. And I think that's one of the things I see, is that not that he was looking for the next SpaceX or that sort of thing, but it was just something that everybody needs. And remembering that we need to fill that niche of things like plumbing and air conditioning and those things that are necessary.
Yeah, and I think that sentiment is something that ranges across all of Gen Z, especially as we look into the workforce, is that we can't see ourselves sitting at a desk for 40 years, and filling out that same paperwork every day. So finding new ideas to these different niches, like you mentioned, whether that's either, working in these fields, getting a trade, or inventing new things that could be a 2-year project, 3-year project, but then going on to something else. I think it's safe to say that Gen Z is always ready to stay on their feet and move around if necessary. So to shift back to that Power of Business course you teach, there are 3 pillars in that course. And for the viewers who may not know, I was a student in that course, and it's one of the reasons why we have Dr. Page on today. But the 3 pillars in that course consist of finance, marketing, and management. So I'd like to dive in with a question from each. So a little bit on the finance side. Traditional finance, when you say finance, you think immediately of cash, the stock market, and things like that. Whereas Gen Z, when you say finance, they may think of things like, investing on the phone, Robinhood, cryptocurrency. So what do you think about Gen Z's interest in cryptocurrency? And, since cryptocurrency is so new to the world, how could we balance this curiosity when dipping into this new idea?
So I think, if you had asked me this question maybe like about 6 years ago, I'd have been like, oh, cryptocurrency is more of a scam. Don't invest in that sort of thing. And I had a student who told me he wasn't going to be at some class because he needed to be doing some working with blockchains and that sort of thing. I know that's the same thing, but it was just a sort of thing I was like, okay. Now it is much more in mainstream. I mean, it's a sort of thing. We even have the president's, his Bitcoin, the Trump Media and Technology Group, and I just saw that yesterday. I think it hit $2 million or $2 billion in valuation. So obviously, this is much more mainstream. It is the sort of thing of this isn't something that's just going to go away, and it's not a flash in the pan. Now, it is the sort of thing I do foresee that there's going to be more government regulation of this in the future. And so that could change. And how the government regulation goes, I really don't know, because that's not my area of expertise. But it is the sort of thing if they say that about 48% of Gen Z students have gotten into cryptocurrency, and versus millennials, it's only about 40%. And then people who are in the 65 and older, it's only about 10%. So, it is a big difference as to who's getting into Gen Z. I mean, who's getting into cryptocurrency and who's buying it. So I think that you will see that in terms of then how will that influence how people buy things. And already it's the sort of thing of, I know in my law practice over the last 6 years, I started taking Zelle and Venmo and those sort of things because 10 years ago I only took a check, and then it's a sort of thing of most of my clients don't pay by check anymore. It's some other way. I mean, I paid my hairdresser by Venmo for the last couple of years. And so it is that sort of thing of, I see Gen Z being much more flexible in terms of payment ways and ways that they use social media to advertise their business and to get word out there, and just a whole lot of things that we didn't think about. I've had to change the business plans that I did to make sure that they accommodate those. But in terms of finance, also, it's just a sort of thing of, still students have to, and anybody who's going into business has to think about, all right, so what are the things I need to buy for my business? What are the things that are important? Obviously, maybe 20 years ago, you would have just had a computer. Now you have to be thinking about, okay, what's my computing power to be able to support all those different, if you're doing something with cryptocurrency, what sort of protection you're going to have. And that's probably something that people didn't think about a long time ago.
Yeah. And how do you think we can do this cautiously? How do you think we can balance our curiosity with caution in emerging financial tools like this?
I think a lot of it should be education, and I don't know if it's traditionally, I'm not sure, like at URI, if there is any courses on cryptocurrency, but would there be some sort of a cybersecurity that students should take? I know in my role as being on the town council, every month I have to take a course in cybersecurity because the town at one point had somebody break in, and they weren't able to get anything because the town had security measures, but still they were broke in, and it was the sort of thing. It was a huge data breach, and we had insurance to cover it, and then but as a result of that, also anybody who has a town email has to take this regular course to think about, okay, are you clicking on something that you shouldn't? Because we get emails every day from not only constituents, but vendors and a lot of spam. And we don't do that. I know, as a URI professor, I have to take one course a year. I don't know if the students have to take anything to be educating them of things that could come across and be invasive of their email. And so it's one of those things of, perhaps, yes, it would be a huge pain in the neck. It would be something very difficult to regulate if a student did or not. But at the same time, it would be preparing you for the business world, in that if you started doing your cybersecurity training now, that it would then help you, that if you went into a business, to be thinking about, all right, I don't want to click on the link that I got to my, somebody sent me a text and it said, go here to pay for you have a traffic violation. You can pay to the state of Rhode Island, and not realizing, no, the state of Rhode Island never would send you a text, and I don't think that you would get Gen Z to be caught up in that as much as maybe somebody who is older, but it still would be the sort of thing. It would be a good idea to do more cybersecurity training for Gen Z as much as it would be for an older generation.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And again, I think as Gen Z is this kind of generation of media, the embracement of cybersecurity will be something that comes along with it. And you spoke of this before, but when we were discussing Gen Z in business, you mentioned how social media was used as a tool. So I guess we would be diving into the second pillar of that Power of Business course, which is marketing. I want to focus on social media because Gen Z spends a majority of their days on their phones, on social media, on apps like Instagram, X, formerly known as Twitter, Facebook, just to name a few. What are your thoughts on social media? Is it a marketing tool, a stressor for the business environment, or both?
Well, it's a huge marketing tool, and I think that it would almost be uh, it would not be a good thing for a business to go out there and think that they don't need it, or they don't use it. I mean, even if you're looking for like people like my mom. My mom's 85. Okay, so she's not the best at social media, but she looks at it. All right, so the fact that she looks at it, and I sometimes when I have to go back and clean up her emails, and I'll see tons of emails that she just didn't get rid of. But a lot of it is from the stores that she buys from. So, at some point she'll be like, oh, she'll even call me up and she'll say, Kim, there's a sale here. And she'll name off the retailer, and she'll be like, you should use it. You can get 50% off. And I'm thinking, I don't really need anything. But my point is that even my 85-year-old mom is looking at the social media. So if she is, and she's not on her computer all the time, Gen Z is. So yes, I think it's a great tool. It is then, how do you use it as a business? And it's knowing, so where are your customers? What would be the right platform to go on? It's a sort of thing of, I do the social media for my church. And so we have an older population at the church. And so I do use, but I put it on both Facebook and Instagram because it's a sort of thing of, I know that if we want to get anybody who's young, they're not going to look at Facebook, so it's that sort of thing. Now, do we have lots of users? No. But that's probably just because it's a church thing and that sort of thing. And I'm not an expert in social media, but my point is that we at least put something out there. And so I think that if you're a business, you're going to have to think about, how is the best way to do that? Are you using music? Are you using videos? Or are you catching catchy things that you are using the right words to get out to folks? All those things that you have to know your audience. And sometimes that can be difficult for a business they may think their audience is one group, and then they find out, oh no, it's expanded, or, it's narrower, whatever. You have to make sure that you know that, so that then you can cue in to get the right tags to have people start looking at your stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the second part of your question? I answered the social media part.
No, I'm sure I framed that incorrectly, but that was mostly it was based on social media. And I think that the usage of social media, especially when it comes to something like marketing, like you had mentioned, it's a valuable tool. And with Gen Z, this generation that's seemingly going to figure out every corner of social media, it's just going to grow from here. So whether that's, we have new technologies coming out. You have the Meta glasses, and that has cameras inside, and you have I know the new tech, they're trying to put almost like screens in the glasses. So what's marketing going to look like there? How's Gen Z going to activate that there? And this podcast discussing more about entering the workforce. What's that going to do for that population? They're seeing all these ads, for example, they're going online. How easier is it going to be to, instead of posting a job hiring on LinkedIn or on Instagram, why not just send a direct notification to someone's phone or home TV or something like that? So I think that is, it's a topic that will stay with us and definitely lead us into the future. So now I want to discuss the third and final pillar from the Power Business course, which is management. And I'll launch you a question from there. Gen Z is a different generation, of course, than the others, especially when it comes to the needs that we have emotionally and in the workplace. So for a member of this generation that's more based on looking at values of, is this going to be a psychologically safe environment? Am I going to, have to move around after this? I know I mentioned before that Gen Z wants to stay on their feet, but is it a 2 month, or is it going to be a 1 month or 2 month or 1 year leap when they jump between positions? How are, in your opinion, Gen Z's expectations reshaping leadership styles so that when they join the workforce, I guess possibly they could workplaces could have a little bit more retainment.
So this is, I'm sure you could have a topic on this just in itself in terms of management styles. Yeah, so this some of the things I see. My husband works at the Naval War College, and so he does gaming to learn or gaming to explore things. And so he said most of the people he works with are about 55 and older, and their fear is they're not bringing any new war gamers in, and he's been trying to rectify that. And he's like going down to Georgetown, and they have a war gaming club down there. I mean, and it's this sort of thing. It's not always war gaming. It's sometimes just gaming to solve a problem. And he goes up to Dartmouth and he talks to them, and he does a seminar with them where they do this. But it is the sort of thing of when you have people or a generation that doesn't always stay in one job for a long period of time, that can be difficult, because it is the sort of thing of learning how to game isn't something you're going to learn in a year. It's the sort of thing of it takes a long time to develop those skills and to understand how to do it well, and to how that sort of thing. So it is, how do you track people then to staying into a position for at least 10 years before you're really good and that it's something that they like to do? When you have folks who are more open to jumping around in a different job and trying something different. And that's not a bad thing, but it can be difficult when you have a government job. And I have heard that there are some difficulties in getting students to go into government work because they don't see it nearly as appealing as they used to. In terms of business jobs, it is the sort of thing I think the businesses have to be open. When they hire somebody, they're not going to be hiring them for the 30 years and the gold watch. Although I can't imagine anybody gives a gold watch, because who wears watches these days unless it's, an Apple Watch or a Fitbit. And so it is the sort of thing of business has to know in terms of Gen Z of what do people want, and it's the sort of thing of I think that you're going to see more people who are getting into a job for, do they like what they're doing? Do they feel socially involved with it? I know my son he's in his third job since he graduated in 2019. And that's for a variety of different reasons. He moved around. His wife is finished vet school. She did an internship, and now she's down in Alabama. So he's moved around a lot. But it is the sort of thing of that's worked out well for him to move around. He's at first, when he was on when he went to job number 3, he was a little nervous because he's like, oh, I didn't work that long. People, is this going to be a bad work history? And it was fine.
Yeah.
You want me to talk about networking and socializing, or go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, like you had mentioned, though, and that whole thing about that section of the Power Business course is if employers can provide an environment that will allow for, and I did mention before that Gen Z does not want to stay in one place for a longer amount of time, but if that retainment can add a few more years onto the path of Gen Z, I think that's what workplaces are looking more to do. I want to jump ahead a little bit to discuss more. I know we hit the business side, but I want to discuss more about the reason why we're doing the podcast. Excuse me. I want to discuss the workforce part of it, entering the workforce. So I know I am jumping ahead here, but I definitely an important topic I want to hit. So, you go down the street. I mean, I live in Massachusetts. We have this, it's Route 6. It crosses right through my town, and there's about maybe 100 businesses, whether that's fast food restaurants, flagship stores and plazas, Target, Walmart. We have a mall. And it's funny because not just in, minimum wage jobs, quote unquote, as those locations, but also on LinkedIn, there are now hiring signs and job postings just about everywhere. Unfortunately, young people and Gen Z are struggling to get that interview, to get in the door, and to sit down and get that position. What are your thoughts on that? Why is this happening? And maybe you could offer some advice to this generation to push them ahead so they can get active in the workplace.
So I think there's a lot of for hire signs because people are jumping around a lot in terms of their jobs. And so what does the business do about that? Well, if somebody quits your job, I mean, there's not a whole lot you can do as the business. You might want to find out what is it that people didn't like as to, could you do an exit interview? Even if somebody says, I quit, I'm not coming back, would a business follow up with them in a week or two, maybe 3 weeks after the person isn't quite as angry and say, so what is it that you didn't like? But you'd have to be ready to accept the feedback that you got. And then also, would you be willing to change? Now, if people were quitting because the pay is too low, well, that could be difficult for a business. Now, on the reverse side, for the Gen Zers who are looking for jobs and having problems finding something in their major, that's becoming more and more difficult these days. I know my nephew graduated from college last year, and then he has his is in graphic arts, and he's had a hard time finding something in that area. And my father-in-law, who would be one of the basically the greatest generation, he thinks that my nephew should quit working at the restaurant and just concentrate on finding a job. And I'm kind of like, ooh, I don't know about that. It's the sort of thing of then he won't have any income coming in, and depending how the job market is. So I'm like, okay, that my nephew is working at a restaurant, and maybe that isn't his dream job or what he wants to do with this degree, but I would be like, keep the day job and be looking for something else. So what should he be doing? It would be the sort of thing of he needs to start doing little side jobs of putting his graphics out there, maybe on TikTok, maybe on an Etsy site. He needs to start networking with people and talking to everybody who he can to say, I am really interested in doing X. And maybe he doesn't know exactly what he wants to do in graphic arts, but even if he takes like a side job that isn't exactly what he wants, and but it's that connection. And it is the sort of thing when my son graduated, and he graduated in May from Penn State. His degree was in economics, and didn't have a real firm idea. He knew he wanted to work in business. And it was the sort of thing I had him talk to my cousin, who her job is to link people together. And she started saying, you need to talk to X person. They work for this company. And that she talked to that person, and they were like, well, I don't have any jobs available, but I know this contact. And eventually, so he had about 3 different people that he talked to until he came to somebody who was like, yes, and we're hiring, and we would like to do an interview with you. And so it is that sort of thing of, I think, more jobs today. I mean, yeah, you can apply through a lot of different places and your resume goes nowhere because it is much more of AI generated. So find out, if you want to get a job, what will AI be looking for that you make sure you put that on your resume. When I was hiring at the food pantry, we were looking for a bookkeeper, and I had like 150 people apply for this part-time bookkeeping job. I can't tell you the number of people who had no bookkeeping experience. I was just like, I thought, didn't you at least look at the what we were looking for? And so it is the sort of thing of start tailoring what you want to do and figure, and even if you don't know what it is, at least start somewhere, start small, and then that could be your foot in the door that you can get into something more. So that would be my networking. It would be know how technology works so that you can make your resume look the best, and socialize with people. It's the sort of thing, networking, socializing, kind of the same thing, but be telling all your friends, all your relatives, this is what I'm looking for. Do you know of any leads? And then follow up. it can be almost a full-time job looking for a job. But, I think it is worth it. And you have to realize you may not get your dream job the first time. And so maybe it's the sort of thing you may have to take steps along the way. It took me a long time to be a university professor.
I feel like we have learned a lot from you today. And obviously, your students learn a lot from you every single semester that you teach this class. Is there something that you have learned from Gen Z that's been like valuable to you?
Yeah, it's the sort of thing of I think one of the things that I've learned to think about more from my students is to be taking care of my mental health. And not that that's been a concern, but when I hear my students say this, and at first, it was the sort of thing maybe 5 years ago, the first time somebody said to me, "I'm taking a mental health day," I was kind of like, yeah, okay, you're skipping class, that sort of thing. And it's still sometimes I still think that, okay, I'm not going to be lying and saying that. But it's made me realize of how important it is not only to my students, but then what sort of things do I do for myself? And so for myself, I don't teach during the summer. I use this as a huge time to regroup, to go travel and do other things. And I realized, yeah, this is really important. It really then gets me excited to go into the fall semester because I've had 3 months off. And so, then it's been that sort of thing that I can understand. I think I'm a little bit less, throwing it off and that my students don't show up for class for a mental health day. It doesn't mean that if they miss the quiz that I'm going to say like, oh, that's okay. No,
Right.
But, it means if they don't turn something in on time, I'm still not going to say, oh, that's okay. But I understand it more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that not only Gen Z being able to teach other generations that, but again, this generational interplay of these ideas, I think is something that we're finding out. You go back 20 years, the workplace was very set in stone what it was, and no one could change it. And you have Gen Z and all the events leading up in these past 20 years that kind of break that glass ceiling. And now the workplace is becoming a place where, all right, well, this group is very good at this, and this group is very good at this. You have this idea, all right, this group definitely, millennials, Gen Z, they're the ones that are going to take on things like mental health days. Why don't we bring that onto the whole workplace? And then older generations who never saw that, something that benefits them. So I think, and we've discussed it before, but that generational interplay and that exchange of ideas should be another reason why Gen Z really searches for that full-time job and searches for that position. So not only can they work and they get together in that team, but that they can make a change for other people as well, including members of their organization. Dr. Page, thank you for joining us today for this lively discussion. And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in.
If you like what you've heard, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Please feel free to rate the episode, leave a review, or spread the word on social.
And be sure to follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook to join the conversation and connect with others tuning in. Thank you and take care.